Welcome back to the channel, and I want to start this video with just a little bit of an apology. Well, a lot of an apology. This is really for my longtime viewers. It has been 3 years and 5 months, almost 3.5 years since we've uploaded any content to do with the white Trans Am named Sally. Now, I could give you all kinds of stories about that, but ultimately life happens. And life happened to me just like it does everybody else, and this project got shelved. But we are about to get serious about the project, which segues perfectly into the cousin cars that are sitting behind me right now. I'm Jason, and this is Saving Sally. Okay, so why are there two cars sitting beside me? There's a lot of reasons for that. I'm going to cover some of the big ones right now. One of the biggest reasons is that I had all these ideas that I wanted to do to the white Trans Am named Sally. But I would find myself at times saying, maybe I would just be better off to just go back stock. But then I would, come to a little bit of a conclusion on that and then back off and say, no, I think it would be a lot more fun to build a car that was, better than stock. And then I would be back to the stock idea again and back and forth and back and forth. And ultimately that really did become kind of a big internal conflict of what to do with the car. And that conflict alone was part of the reason that the project sat untouched for so long. Another reason was, although this is a hobby and this car is something that I'm very passionate about, the channel and the online presence is also an attempt to earn a little bit of money. In a perfect world, earn enough money to more than cover the cost of the projects, but at least to cover some of it. And one of the things that I found that for whatever reason, the Camaro is a much more popular car than the Firebird. And so in order to reach a wider audience, I thought it would be a good idea to bring in the cousin car and see what we could do to reach that larger audience. Reason number 3, probably the single most enjoyable car series that I've watched in a really long time is a series that was called High-Low from a group called Donut Media. Most of you have probably seen it. If you haven't, it's a fantastic series where they take two nearly identical cars. One of those cars gets really cheap, kind of bottom of the barrel or maybe everyday man kind of parts. The other car gets these super top end kind of dream build parts, and they assemble these cars and they test them and they see which parts are worth it. That really hit home with me. That was a home run of a series. So I thought it'd be a good idea to do something similar here, although I can't do what they did. My intention is do you buy a car kind of high, a car that doesn't need much, and then spend a little bit of money getting it where it needs to be? Or do you buy a car for a lot less money that, pay a lot less down here, but spend a lot more bringing the car back? I guess I'm a glutton for punishment, and we're going to take on both. We are planning to convert this automatic car to a manual transmission car. We do want to keep it, although no longer stock, somewhat true to the original stock form. And this car would serve as a great reference point because this car is, in fact, a manual transmission car. And it would kind of keep us grounded in our journey to get there. Plus, it'll give us a nice baseline to remember where we came from and where we landed in terms of performance. All that said, behind me are two nearly identical cars. Both are 1991 GM F-bodies. Both have similar RPO codes. That's specs if you're not an F-body fan. Both are 305 TunePort V8s. Both have the upgraded appearance package, which was called the Aero package. Most notably was a spoiler on each, but there are a few other things. The Trans Am having this low wing that looks a bit like the 4th gen wing. It was, of course, inspired by the Banshee concept car from 1988. The Camaro has this wing that looks a little bit like the Ferrari F40s. GM's not likely to ever admit that was the inspiration for that wing, but we all know. The top engine offering for these cars was a 350. If you wanted a car that had T-tops, that was a mandatory drop down from the 350 to the 305. The claim was that the frame just wasn't rigid enough to handle the 350 with the T-tops. Now with the Camaro here, the manual transmission meant a mandatory 305. Ultimately, General Motors said that the car would not be able to handle the torque loading that was capable with a manual transmission. Both of these cars are wearing features that were available for the first time in 1991 and were specific to 1991 and 92 models only. The Trans Am has these new ground effects that sort of sweep up the side of the car, almost like they're trying to scoop air or forcing the car a little lower. The front of the Pontiac is also sporting a new look, and look at these deep recesses for the fog lights. The front end was inspired by the Banshee concept car from 1988 as well. In fact, a lot of this car takes cues from that 1988 concept car. Also for 91 and 92 only, the taillights were slightly different in the Trans Ams, and you can see that in this little thin strip of, looks like a reflector just above the taillights and immediately below the rear hatch. Now to me, the Trans Am went kind of a different direction than the Camaro. The Trans Am looked like it was trying so hard to be as aerodynamic as possible. Aerodynamics was a big buzzword back in the late 80s and early 90s. And you can look at the cars that were around in just the years previous and see that a lot of them look like shoeboxes on wheels, you know. There just weren't a lot of considerations given to aerodynamics other than tilting the windshield backwards. But looking at this Trans Am here, it looks like a wedge or a blade designed to cut right through the air. Now over to the Camaro. These hood blisters were new for 91 and 92 only, and only on the Z28 trim cars. The ground effects were changed, maybe enlarged a little bit, I'm not certain about that, but it looks like they made them just big enough to add these vents. Now these vents look like they're scooping air and diverting some sort of cooling to probably some sort of critical components within the car. But the reality is these vents are just for looks only. They don't do anything. They dump air onto the tire treads, so I guess you could argue they're keeping your tires cooler, if you want that. But they look really cool. So both cars got a little bit of a facelift. The Camaro stayed, in my opinion, truer to the previous year models, while the Firebird Trans Am was, I don't want to say a complete departure, but it was a much different look. Now this Z28 has been repainted. This is not the original color, although it is somewhat close. This is called Garnet Red, and the code is G7E like Echo, W like Whiskey, A like Alpha, 132X like X-Ray. This is a tri-coat paint, and it was available on 6th gen Camaros. I think some of the Cadillacs had it. It's a lot more expensive of a paint job. And when these cars were made, you know, budget building was kind of the name of the game, so something like a tri-coat color just wasn't in the cards. The original color for this car was called Dark Red Metallic, and right here I can kind of show you where the two colors come together, and you can spot the difference. So what are the plans with these cars? Projects like this can run on for a very long time, and as that happens, plans can change. And so don't get too mad at me if we don't hold true to this in later videos, but as of today, the plans for this car are to keep it close to stock. We are going to redo some interior components, try to rebuild it back to get it the way it should be. For example, there's a little bit of looseness in the steering right now. This car, however, we're going to get a little bit more wild. We do still plan on using the 383 stroker, although probably not the 383 stroker that we originally talked about to put in this car. We still have it. I'm just not certain about that engine any longer. We do plan to use the first TPI intake. I also plan on getting this cat that keeps leaving paw prints all over my cars out of here. Go away, kitty. Go away. We are going to use the first TPI intake on this car, and the bigger displacement, whether that be a 350 or a 383. Right now we are leaning more towards the 383 stroker. We plan on trying to drop some weight in this car. So the new engine is going to have some aluminum heads. Of course, that's going to save some weight. We plan on using tubular K-member, some tubular A-arms. That should also help us reduce some weight. We've got some lowering springs that should drop the car about an inch in the front. Maybe, I think it was a half inch in the front and an inch in the back. I'm not certain about that. But ultimately, we are going to lower this car. And another big one is we plan on swapping this from an automatic to a T56 6-speed manual transmission. Now we're going to start with the Camaro. We're going to jump on the Camaro. That's our first project. And we're doing it first because it's drive ready. It's ready to go to car shows. It's in pretty good shape. And the interior is red. I mean, really red. It's so red, in fact, it shocks people. People are just not ready for that amount of red in any car. So I gave myself a budget of $4,000, and we have ordered all of the goodies that we're going to need to change out the interior components. We are going to save some of the red, but we are going to tone it down a little bit. So there's still going to be some red in there. We're not going all the way from that. But, you know, ultimately I wanted a car that was a joy to drive, and I wanted people to look in it and be shocked not by how red it was, but by how nice the interior actually is. So if that's something you're going to want to see, make sure you're subscribed. Once the interior is finished on the Camaro, we plan on moving over to the white Trans Am named Sally, and the intention is an initial engine swap. Plans may change, remember that disclaimer. But that is the intention right now. We already have the budget for it. We are essentially just waiting on availability from the mechanic, because that's another thing that I'm going to have to address. If I'm being honest with myself, one of the things that I've discovered is that I don't have the time that I thought I was going to have to work on these projects. So if I want to get it done, as they say, You got to pay to play, and I am going to have some of this stuff done professionally. I'm still going to try to document every step of the way, at least what I can document and have access to, and share the expenses, the results, the outcomes of the performance with you, so that if you are planning on doing one of these too, you can kind of have an idea maybe what you can expect if your build is anything like mine. So getting back to what's coming next, we're going to go back to the Camaro. And if you want to see this interior go from looking like somebody exploded a can of red spray paint to looking like something that most anybody would enjoy riding around, certainly would want to drive, then make sure you're subscribed. And until next time, I'm Jason, and this is Saving Sally.